The silence in the Wellington mansion was deafening. Not the peaceful quiet of wealth and privilege, but the heavy, suffocating silence of a family shattered by grief. Marcus Wellington III sat in his bedroom window seat, staring out at the manicured gardens that stretched endlessly across their Connecticut estate. At 7 years old, he should have been running through those gardens, his laughter echoing off the marble fountains. Instead, he hadn't spoken a single word in 6 months, not since the night his mother died. William Wellington stood in the doorway, watching his son with desperate eyes. The tech billionaire who commanded boardrooms filled with Harvard MBAs, who could negotiate billion-dollar deals with a single phone call, felt completely powerless in the face of his child's silence. "Marcus!" William's voice cracked slightly. "Would you like to come down for breakfast?" Nothing. Marcus didn't even turn his head. The boy had been the light of their family. Before the accident, he chattered constantly about dinosaurs, asked endless questions about how airplanes worked, and sang silly songs that made Sarah laugh until she cried. Sarah, his beautiful wife, who had been driving home from her book club that rainy October night when a drunk driver ran a red light. Now Marcus moved through their 15,000 square foot home like a ghost. He ate when food was placed in front of him, went to bed when told, but the spark that made him uniquely Marcus had vanished with his mother. William had spared no expense trying to help his son. Dr. Patricia Holbrook, the most renowned child psychologist in New York, had been the first. She'd arrived with her leather briefcase and clinical smile, spending 2 hours trying to get Marcus to engage. Selective mutism following trauma, she'd diagnosed. He'll need intensive therapy. 3 months later, Marcus was no better. Dr. James Chen, a specialist in childhood grief counseling, had been next. He'd brought art supplies, thinking creative expression might unlock what words couldn't. Marcus had stared at the blank paper for 50 minutes without picking up a single crayon. Dr. Alexandra Rodriguez tried play therapy. Dr. Michael Thompson attempted cognitive behavioral techniques. Dr. Jennifer Walsh specialized in trauma-informed care. Dr. Robert Kim had published papers on selective mutism in children. 7 doctors, 7 different approaches, 7 failures. Each appointment cost thousands of dollars. Each session ended the same way, with Marcus retreating further into himself and William's hope dimming a little more. "He needs more time," they all said. "These things can't be rushed." But how much time? How long could his little boy live, trapped in this prison of silence? The psychiatrist prescribed medications with names William couldn't pronounce. The therapist recommended residential treatment facilities. One even suggested that Marcus might benefit from being separated from the traumatic environment of their home. William had refused. Losing Sarah had nearly destroyed him. He wouldn't lose Marcus too. Standing in his son's doorway this morning, William made a decision. He needed help, but not the kind that came with medical degrees and fancy offices. He needed someone who could simply be present with Marcus, who could give the boy the constant care and attention that William's demanding schedule as CEO couldn't provide. He needed a housekeeper. Not the rotating parade of cleaning services they'd used since Sarah's death, but someone permanent. Someone who could become part of their family. That afternoon, William sat in his office reviewing applications. The agency had sent their best candidates, women with impeccable references, years of experience with wealthy families, background checks that revealed nothing more scandalous than a parking ticket. Then his assistant brought in one more file. "This one came in late," she said apologetically. "She doesn't have experience with families quite like yours, but her references are, well, see for yourself." Maya Johnson, age 34, single mother. Her previous job had been as a custodial worker at Connecticut Children's Medical Center, where she'd worked the night shift for 8 years. Her references weren't from millionaire families, they were from nurses, doctors, and social workers. "Maya has a gift with children," wrote Dr. Ellen Murphy, head of pediatric oncology. "I've watched her comfort scared kids in ways that our trained staff couldn't. She has something you can't teach in school, genuine compassion." Another reference came from Maria Santos, a night nurse. Maya lost her own son 3 years ago. He was killed serving in Afghanistan. Instead of letting grief destroy her, she channeled it into caring for others. The children on our ward adored her. She would sing to them when they couldn't sleep, tell them stories, just sit with them when they were afraid. William stared at the simple application. Maya Johnson had no college degree, no certifications in child development, no experience managing luxury homes. What she had was something no amount of money could buy, the understanding of a mother who had lost everything and still chose to love. He picked up his phone and dialed her number. Maya Johnson arrived at the Wellington mansion on a gray Monday morning, carrying everything she owned in 2 worn suitcases. She stood at the front entrance, looking up at the towering columns and endless windows, feeling like Alice staring at the Queen's castle. The house was beautiful and cold, like a museum where people happened to live. Crystal chandeliers cast rainbows on marble floors. Oil paintings in heavy gold frames depicted ancestors Maya suspected no one really remembered. Everything was perfect, pristine, and utterly lacking in warmth. William met her in the foyer, his expensive suit wrinkled from another sleepless night. Dark circles shadowed his eyes, and his usually perfectly styled hair looked like he'd been running his hands through it. "Thank you for coming," he said, his voice heavy with exhaustion. "I should warn you, Marcus isn't like other children right now. He doesn't speak. He barely acknowledges that other people exist. The previous housekeepers, they found it unsettling." Maya nodded, her heart already aching for this broken family. She'd seen enough grief in her 34 years to recognize it in all its forms. The father's desperate hope, the way he talked about his son in the past tense, as if the Marcus he'd known was gone forever. "Where is he now?" she asked quietly. "His room. 2nd floor end of the hall. He spends most of his time there." Maya climbed the curved staircase, her hand trailing along the polished banister. The hallway stretched before her like something from a fairy tale, lined with doors that probably opened onto rooms larger than the apartments she'd lived in her whole life. Marcus's room was at the end door, slightly ajar. Maya knocked gently and waited. When no answer came, she pushed the door open and stepped inside. The room was enormous, bigger than most people's living rooms. Bookshelves lined one wall, filled with picture books that looked barely touched. A castle-shaped playhouse sat in one corner, elaborate enough to have its own working drawbridge. Toys that probably cost more than Maya's monthly salary were arranged on shelves with military precision. And there, curled up in the window seat with his knees drawn to his chest, was the most heartbreaking little boy Maya had ever seen. Marcus Wellington III was small for 7, with his father's sharp jawline and his mother's golden hair that caught the morning light. He wore a navy blue sweater that probably cost more than Maya's entire wardrobe, but clothes couldn't hide the profound sadness that seemed to emanate from his tiny frame. Maya didn't say anything at first. She'd learned during those long nights at the children's hospital that sometimes the most powerful thing you could offer another person was simply your presence. She settled into the reading chair across from the window seat, far enough away that Marcus wouldn't feel crowded, but close enough that he'd know she was there. From her purse, she pulled out a small photo, her son David, in his army uniform, grinning at the camera with the confidence of a young man who believed he was invincible. "That's my boy," she said softly, not expecting a response. "David?" He was 22 when this picture was taken. Loved to sing, had a voice like an angel, though he'd get embarrassed if I told him that. Marcus didn't move, but Maya caught the almost imperceptible shift in his posture. He was listening. "David used to sing me this song when I was sad," she continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "Said his grandmother taught it to him, though I sure didn't remember teaching him any such thing." Maya began to hum a low melodic tune that seemed to wrap around the room like a warm blanket. It was an old spiritual her own grandmother had sung about finding peace in dark valleys and light in the deepest night. For the first time in 6 months, Marcus turned his head and looked directly at another person. Maya's breath caught, but she didn't stop humming. She met his eyes, startling blue like his father's, but filled with an ancient sadness that no child should carry. They looked at each other across the space between them. Two people who understood loss in ways they wished they didn't. That was how William found them an hour later. His son, who hadn't made eye contact with anyone since the funeral, was watching Maya with complete attention as she hummed softly and folded his laundry with gentle, practiced hands. "I can make lunch," Maya said when William appeared in the doorway. "Marcus, would you like to help me?" Sometimes cooking makes everything feel a little better. To William's amazement, Marcus slid down from the window seat and followed Maya toward the kitchen. Over the following days, Maya established routines that somehow made the massive house feel more like a home. She cooked simple meals, grilled cheese sandwiches and tomato soup, chocolate chip cookies that filled the kitchen with warmth. She hummed while she worked the same melodies that had comforted David and now seemed to cast a spell over Marcus. She didn't push the boy to speak or engage. Instead, she simply included him in the rhythm of daily life. When she watered the plants, she handed him the small watering can. When she folded laundry, she gave him washcloths to stack. When she sat in the garden reading, she patted the space beside her in case he wanted to join. Marcus began to shadow her movements through the house, still silent but present in a way he hadn't been since his mother's death. William watched from doorways and around corners, afraid that too much attention might break whatever fragile magic was happening. For the first time in months, his son seemed engaged with the world around him. Maya had been with them for 3 weeks when she made a discovery that changed everything. While cleaning Sarah's former office, she found a tablet filled with voice recordings, bedtime stories Sarah had made for Marcus during her frequent business trips. That night, Maya knocked on Marcus's bedroom door. "I found something that belonged to your mama," she said gently. "Would you like to hear her voice?" The tablet trembled in Maya's hands as she sat on the edge of Marcus's bed. The little boy had followed her to his room without hesitation, something that would have been unthinkable just weeks earlier. Now he climbed onto the bed beside her, his small body radiating nervous energy. "Your mama made these for you," Maya said softly, showing him the screen filled with voice recordings labeled with dates and story titles. "Looks like she wanted to make sure you could hear her voice even when she couldn't be here to tuck you in." Marcus stared at the tablet, his blue eyes wide and uncertain. Maya could practically feel the war raging inside him, the desperate longing to hear his mother's voice, battling against the fear that it would hurt too much. "We don't have to listen if you're not ready," Maya assured him. "But sometimes when I miss David, something fierce hearing his voice on an old voicemail makes me feel like he's not really gone, just somewhere else for a while." Marcus reached out with one small finger and touched the screen. The first recording was titled "The Dragon and the Brave Little Knight" and dated just 2 weeks before Sarah's death. Maya pressed play. Once upon a time, Sarah's voice filled the room, warm and alive, and so achingly familiar that Maya felt tears spring to her eyes. There was a little knight who was braver than all the grown-up knights in the kingdom. Marcus made a sound, the first vocalization he'd produced in 6 months. It was barely a whimper, but it came from somewhere deep in his chest, like a dam beginning to crack. They listened to 3 stories that night. With each recording, Marcus leaned closer to the tablet, as if trying to climb inside his mother's voice. When the last story ended, he looked at Maya with eyes full of questions he still couldn't voice. "She loved you so much," Maya whispered, smoothing his hair back from his forehead. "You can hear it in every word. That kind of love doesn't just disappear, baby. It lives right here." She placed her hand gently over his heart. This became their new bedtime routine. Every night, Maya and Marcus would curl up together and listen to Sarah's stories. Slowly, gradually, the boy began to relax into these moments. Sometimes he would curl against Maya's side like a much younger child. Other times he would trace patterns on the tablet screen as if trying to touch his mother through the glass. William would stand outside the door, listening to his dead wife's voice and watching his son slowly come back to life. For the first time since the accident, he began to hope that they might actually be okay. But hope, William had learned, was a dangerous thing. Dr. Patricia Holbrook arrived unannounced on a Thursday afternoon, her briefcase swinging authoritatively as she strode into the foyer. William's mother had hired her, convinced that her grandson needed proper professional help instead of relying on the help. "I'm concerned about the lack of progress," Dr. Holbrook announced, settling into William's study like she owned it. 6 months of trauma therapy would typically show significant improvement by now. I think we need to consider more intensive intervention. Marcus has been improving, William protested. He's more engaged, more present. Maya has been incredible with him. Dr. Holbrook's smile was condescending. Mr. Wellington, I understand that you're grateful for your employees' companionship with your son. But there's a difference between emotional support and actual therapeutic intervention. Marcus needs evidence-based treatment, not lullabies and bedtime stories. She insisted on observing Marcus immediately. William reluctantly led her upstairs, where they found Maya and Marcus in the kitchen. The boy was helping her roll out cookie dough, his small hands covered in flour, something that might have been the ghost of a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. Marcus, Dr. Holbrook's voice cut through the peaceful scene like a scalpel. I'd like to speak with you. The transformation was instant. Marcus froze, his entire body going rigid. The light that had been slowly returning to his eyes dimmed, and he stepped closer to Maya, seeking protection. Perhaps we could, Maya started. I think it's best if you leave us alone, Dr. Holbrook interrupted. Family therapy requires proper boundaries. Maya looked to William, who nodded reluctantly. She squeezed Marcus's shoulder gently before stepping out of the kitchen. For 20 minutes, Dr. Holbrook tried every technique in her considerable arsenal. She offered toys, asked questions, even attempted some of the art therapy that had failed months earlier. Marcus might as well have been carved from stone. Finally frustrated and running out of options, Dr. Holbrook played what she thought was her trump card. Marcus, she said firmly, your mother wouldn't want you to stay silent forever. She'd want you to be brave and talk to the people trying to help you. The effect was devastating. Marcus's face crumpled and he began to shake. Not crying, but something deeper and more desperate. He pressed his hands over his ears and squeezed his eyes shut, as if trying to block out the world entirely. Maya, who'd been listening anxiously from the hallway, couldn't stand it anymore. She pushed through the kitchen door and knelt beside Marcus's chair. Shh, baby, she murmured, pulling him into her arms. It's okay. You're okay. And then, without thinking, she began to hum. The same melody she'd hummed that first day, the one that had first broken through his walls. But this time, she added words, a lullaby her grandmother had sung, that she had sung to David, that Sarah had hummed to Marcus on the last recording they'd listened to the night before. Hush now, my baby, be still, love, don't cry. Sleep like you're rocked by the stream. Marcus's body began to relax against her. His breathing slowed. And then, in a voice rusty from months of disuse, barely a whisper, but unmistakably real, he joined in. Sleep and remember my last lullaby, and I'll be with you when you dream. The kitchen fell silent except for the sound of Dr. Holbrook's sharp intake of breath and William's quiet sob from the doorway. Marcus had spoken. Not just spoken, he had sung. The same lullaby his mother used to sing, the one Maya had somehow impossibly known without ever hearing it before. Mama used to sing that? Marcus whispered, his voice thin but clear. He looked up at Maya with wonder, as if seeing her for the first time. How did you know Mama's song? 6 months later, the Wellington mansion hummed with life in a way it hadn't since Sarah's death. Marcus's laughter echoed through the halls as he chased their new puppy, a golden retriever named Harmony, that Maya had suggested when Marcus started asking for a pet who could sing with us. The boy, who had once spent his days in silent isolation, now chattered constantly, making up for lost time with an endless stream of questions, observations, and increasingly elaborate stories about dinosaurs who went on space adventures. William stood in his study watching through the window as Maya and Marcus built a snowman in the garden. His son was directing the operation with typical 7-year-old authority, insisting that their creation needed not just a carrot nose, but also stick arms positioned just right for conducting music. Dr. Holbrook had been notably absent from their lives since that transformative day in the kitchen. Her final report had reluctantly acknowledged that unconventional therapeutic interventions had achieved remarkable results, though she'd been careful not to give Maya any official credit. William didn't care about professional recognition or medical explanations. He only cared that his son was happy. Maya had become more than a housekeeper. She was family in every way that mattered. Marcus called her Miss Maya, but treated her like a beloved aunt, seeking her comfort when he scraped his knee and her approval when he learned something new at school. She had moved into the guest house on the property, creating a cozy space filled with photos of David and mementos from her previous life. But most evenings found her in the main house sharing dinner with William and Marcus, helping with homework, or curled up in the living room listening to Marcus practice the piano pieces he'd begged to learn. "She knew my mama's song because she's like my mama," Marcus had explained to his father one evening with the simple wisdom of childhood. Not the same, but like they both knew how to make the hurt stop with music. William had come to understand that love couldn't be bought or prescribed. It couldn't be found in medical degrees or expensive therapies. Sometimes it simply arrived in the form of a woman who understood loss and chose to respond with grace, who believed that healing could be as simple as humming a lullaby to a broken child. The song Maya had sung wasn't one Sarah had taught her. It was one they'd both learned from the same source that teaches all mothers how to comfort their children. Love itself passed down through generations in melodies that transcend words, offering hope to anyone wise enough to listen. In the end, the miracle wasn't that Marcus found his voice again. The miracle was that he'd never really lost it. He'd just been waiting for someone who knew how to help him remember the song.